Part 1. Pop Smoke. The idea that home is a fortress collapses the moment fame enters the room. Privacy shrinks. Distance disappears. The walls that once separated the inside from the outside turn transparent. For artists rising at explosive speed, the house is no longer a retreat. It becomes a location. A marker. A pin on a digital map that anyone can see. Pop Smoke was not drifting upward. He was accelerating. Brooklyn drill had found its global voice, and his voice was unmistakable. Gravel rough. Commanding. Confident. In a short span of time, he moved from local recognition to industry dominance. The streets of Canarsie no longer defined his daily life. Success had lifted him out, and the industry welcomed him west. Hollywood Hills symbolized arrival. Sunlight. Space. Elevation above the noise. The rented mansion represented victory, not caution. It was large, stylish, and impressive. It was designed to look good, not to resist intrusion. Glass, balconies, elevation, and openness mattered more than layered security. It was a display space, not a bunker. The transition from a guarded mindset to comfort happens quietly. When danger fades from daily memory, vigilance softens. Pop Smoke was no longer sleeping with one eye open. He was recording. Resting. Enjoying momentum. The house became a place to breathe, not a place to defend. Social media erased the final barrier. A luxury gift arrived. Designer packaging. A moment of pride. A casual share. The image went live without thought of consequence. The label was visible. The address readable. The post lasted seconds. The exposure lasted forever. In the digital age, predators do not circle blocks. They scroll. They do not need inside connections. They wait for information to be handed to them. The feed refreshed, and opportunity appeared. To the wrong eyes, the image was not fashion. It was a location. It was proof of wealth. It was confirmation of vulnerability. A small group of teenagers noticed. They did not see an artist shaping a genre. They saw jewelry. Cash. Isolation. Distance from immediate help. The idea of a quick score formed fast. Fame did not intimidate them. It attracted them. The distance between thought and action collapsed. Night erased witnesses. The roads up the hills were quiet. The property did not scream danger. It invited confidence. The intruders did not force the front entrance. They avoided noise. They climbed. They accessed the second level with ease. The house offered angles and shadows. Security existed, but it was not layered for determination. Inside, Pop Smoke was unaware. Water ran. Steam filled the room. Music success meant nothing in that moment. He was alone. Unarmed. Exposed. This was the point where the idea of home as sanctuary failed completely. The safest routine became the most dangerous instant. The confrontation was sudden. Voices. Movement. Adrenaline. Panic colliding with instinct. According to later accounts, compliance came first. Then resistance. The reflex to fight is human. The belief that strength can reverse fate lasts only a heartbeat. In close quarters, with weapons drawn, bravery does not change physics. The shots ended the struggle. Multiple impacts. Chaos. Pain. The attack did not stop at neutralization. It continued with theft and humiliation. Jewelry was taken. The body was left behind. The intruders fled as quickly as they arrived, carrying objects but leaving a life. The Rolex symbolized success. It represented arrival. In the underground resale world, it became a fraction of its worth. The contrast was brutal. A future erased for an amount that could not sustain anyone for long. The exchange rate between human life and greed revealed itself without disguise. Emergency response followed. The damage was irreversible. The loss rippled immediately. New York felt it. The culture felt it. A voice that defined a moment went silent in a space meant for rest. The headlines followed, but the core truth remained simple. The danger did not come from rivalry or music conflict. It came from exposure. The arrests shocked many. The perpetrators were not hardened adults. They were minors. Children shaped by environments where violence felt accessible and consequence felt distant. The case exposed a larger fracture. Technology had shortened the distance between success and threat. Youth had learned to see fame as a resource to be harvested. Pop Smoke left the streets, but the streets did not leave the world around him. The gated hills did not erase envy. They concentrated it. Visibility amplified risk. Comfort weakened preparation. A single post bridged the gap between private life and public access. This story is not about blame. It is about structure. About how modern fame removes the buffer zones that once protected artists after hours. About how sharing becomes surveillance when watched by the wrong audience. About how home loses meaning when location becomes content. For rising artists, the lesson is unforgiving. Silence can be armor. Delay can be defense. What feels harmless to friends can be instruction to predators. In an economy where attention is currency, attention also attracts danger. One moment of pride turned into a permanent warning etched into music history. The house did not fail him. The system around visibility did. Pop Smoke died not because he was careless, but because the world now punishes openness at scale. Do you believe artists today can truly protect their private lives in an era where visibility is rewarded, or is exposure now an unavoidable risk of success? Stay with us for the next chapter, where a trusted home became a trap built from rumors and greed in the story of String Bean. Part 2, String Bean. The era shifts backward to rural America, when fame still felt neighborly and distance felt real. Long roads. Wooden houses. Open yards. Trust woven into daily life. In the early 1970s, country music lived close to the ground. Its stars were familiar faces, not distant icons. They waved back. They drove themselves home. String Bean stood at the center of that world. He was not a rebel or a provocateur. He was a reassurance. Thin frame. Baggy pants. A banjo held like a friendly joke. On television and on stage, he represented harmless laughter and old-fashioned values. Audiences did not see danger when they saw him. They saw comfort. The stage image told only half the story. Offstage, String Bean was shaped by hardship. He had lived through scarcity. He had watched institutions fail ordinary people. That experience left a mark deeper than success could erase. He did not trust banks. He did not trust systems that promised safety through paperwork. He trusted what he could touch. Money stayed close. Cash remained inside the home. Not for display. Not for pride. For control. For certainty. It was a quiet habit, mentioned casually among friends, laughed about in passing. To those who loved him, it was an eccentric detail. To others, it became a rumor with weight. Nashville was not a city built on secrecy. Dressing rooms echoed with talk. Stories moved from mouth to mouth without intent to harm. The idea that String Bean kept his savings at home drifted through conversations. No one imagined it would matter. Fame still felt protected by decency. Two men heard the story differently. They were not masterminds. They were not planners with patience. They were opportunists, hungry for a shortcut. To them, the rumor was not charm. It was an invitation. The house in the woods became a target, not a home. They arrived before night settled fully. The house was empty. The doors yielded. Drawers opened. Mattresses lifted. Floors searched. The hunt grew frantic. Nothing appeared. No stacks. No envelopes. Frustration replaced caution. Leaving empty-handed felt worse than risk. Waiting became the decision. Darkness offered cover. Silence became a tool. Hours passed with only the sound of breathing and anticipation. What began as theft shifted into something colder. When people wait with anger, intention changes. String Bean and his wife returned late. The performance at the Grand Ole Opry had gone as it always did. Applause. Familiar faces. A drive back through quiet roads. The house waited in darkness. It did not warn them. He entered first. Familiar space. Something felt wrong, but recognition came too late. There was no argument. No prolonged exchange. The moment collapsed into shock. Stringbean fell where he stood, inside the place he had guarded with routine and trust. Outside, his wife heard the sound that changed everything. Instinct took over. She ran. The yard that once symbolized peace became exposed ground. She did not make it far. The violence did not stay contained within walls. It followed her into open space. When silence returned, the intruders searched again. Pockets. Cabinets. A purse. The reward was thin. A small amount of cash. Tools. Objects with little meaning. The fortune they believed in never revealed itself. They left with almost nothing, carrying consequences they could not yet understand. Morning brought discovery. A friend arrived expecting routine. Instead, he found devastation. News moved fast. Shock spread through Nashville and beyond. The community did not just mourn a man. It lost a sense of safety. Country music changed that day. Gates appeared where there had been none. Locks multiplied. Trust withdrew. Artists who once lived openly began to guard themselves. The illusion of harmless fame shattered quietly but permanently. Years later, the final irony emerged. Hidden carefully within the house, untouched by panic or greed, the money was found. It had been there the entire time. Close enough to warm the hands of those waiting, yet invisible to desperate eyes. The crime yielded nothing of value. Lives ended. Futures collapsed. Decades passed behind walls for the perpetrators. The balance sheet remained empty. Greed achieved no victory. The tragedy rests not only in loss, but in misunderstanding. Silence allowed a rumor to grow. Familiarity allowed danger to enter. A habit meant for security became a magnet for harm. The house did not protect what secrecy could have. Stringbean became a dividing line in country music history. Before him, stars lived as neighbors. After him, they lived as targets. The sound remained warm, but the doors closed. In the end, this story is not about cash. It is about how words travel without intent and land with consequence. About how innocence can attract the very thing it does not anticipate. About how waiting in darkness changes people more than action ever could. Was the real mistake the habit itself, or the casual way private details become public knowledge among people who believe nothing bad will follow? Continue with Part 3, where uncertainty replaces clarity and a quiet apartment becomes the center of a mystery that still refuses to rest. Part 3, Elliott Smith. Elliott Smith was never loud, yet he filled rooms. His voice did not demand attention. It invited it. Soft delivery. Fragile melodies. Lyrics that sounded like private thoughts spoken out loud. For a generation that felt unseen, his music felt like proof that quiet pain mattered. Success arrived anyway. Awards, attention. Film soundtracks. Prestigious stages. The contrast was severe. Public recognition expanded while his internal world narrowed. Applause did not calm him. Visibility did not stabilize him. The more people listened, the heavier his silence became. Echo Park offered retreat. A modest apartment. Not a mansion. Not a fortress. A place meant to be private, removed from industry noise. The kind of space where someone like Elliott could exist without performance. It was supposed to be a boundary between the outside world and the mind. That boundary failed on an ordinary afternoon. No crowd. No studio session. Just an argument. Words exchanged. Emotions rising. The kind of conflict that feels intense but common. Nothing that signals a final outcome. Nothing that prepares anyone for what followed. According to the account later given, the disagreement led to distance. A bathroom door closed. Space requested. Time meant to cool anger. From behind the door came a sound that did not fit the moment. Not a crash. Not an object falling. A scream. Raw. Sharp. Immediate. The door opened to a scene that never settled into certainty. Elliot was upright. A kitchen knife was in his chest. Not lying down. Not hidden. Visible. Jarring. The image contradicted expectations on both sides of the debate that would follow. In panic, the knife was pulled out. An instinctive act. A human reaction. Also a moment that forever altered the physical evidence. What might have been preserved vanished. Blood patterns changed. Forensic clarity blurred. The intention was rescue. The consequence was confusion. Emergency services were called. Time passed quickly. Efforts failed. Elliot Smith was gone. The immediate narrative took shape with speed. A troubled artist. A history of substance struggles. Lyrics filled with despair. A note found in his car. Words of apology. Words of regret. To many, the story seemed complete. But the examination did not cooperate. The medical review raised questions quietly at first. Then clearly. Not one wound, but two. Both deep. Both deliberate. This alone unsettled assumptions. Acts of self-harm involving knives are uncommon. Multiple strikes even more so. There were no hesitation marks. No shallow testing cuts. No signs of gradual decision. The force required was significant. The direction precise. The intent implied strength and certainty. That certainty conflicted with the portrait of hesitation often seen in similar cases. Hands told another story. Small cuts. Not random. Positioned where defense often appears. Injuries that suggest blocking or grabbing rather than guiding. These details did not offer answers. They offered doubt. Clothing added to the unease. The blade passed through fabric. Most self-inflicted injuries involve exposed skin. The presence of clothing suggested urgency or interruption. It suggested action rather than ritual. The official conclusion refused simplicity. Cause of death was ruled undetermined. Not an endorsement of one theory. Not a rejection of another. The document stated clearly that a third possibility could not be excluded. The file remained open. No charges followed. No closure arrived. What remained was argument. Fans split into camps. Some saw inevitability. Others saw inconsistency. Some trusted the initial narrative. Others focused on the physical details that did not align. Years passed. The discussion did not fade. It hardened. Every detail became contested. The scream. The timing. The note. The knife. The act of removing it. The relationship dynamics. The lack of witnesses. The silence of the apartment afterward. Each point fed a theory. None resolved the case. Elliot Smith became something he never sought. A mystery. His songs transformed under that weight. Lines once heard as metaphor began to sound prophetic. Pain once understood as expression began to feel like evidence. The music did not change. The listening did. This was not a public tragedy played out under lights. It happened behind a door. In a space meant for privacy. That is what made it linger. There was no external threat. No stranger. Only ambiguity living where certainty should have been. The home did not become a crime scene in the traditional sense. It became a question that never left. A quiet apartment turned into an echo chamber for unresolved doubt. Silence did not protect the truth. It amplified speculation. Decades later, the file remains unfinished. The debate remains active. No verdict satisfies everyone. The lack of resolution keeps Elliot Smith suspended between two narratives, belonging fully to neither. His legacy survives intact musically, yet altered emotionally. Every whisper now carries an extra weight. Not because of how he lived, but because of how he died without explanation. When a death leaves space instead of answers, what do you trust more, the story that feels familiar or the details that refuse to fit together? Stay with us for part 4, where a pioneer of sound innovation met his end not through mystery, but through a brutal simplicity waiting at his own gate. Part 4, King Tubby. King Tubby did not chase the spotlight. He rewired it. While others stood at microphones, he stood behind boards and wires, discovering that sound itself could be bent. Echo became space. Silence became rhythm. The remix was not a trick to him. It was a language. Long before digital tools, he treated machines as instruments and turned absence into power. His studio did not rise from concrete towers. It grew inside Waterhouse, a dense neighborhood shaped by survival. Cables ran through cramped rooms. Equipment was built, repaired, and rebuilt by hand. This was not a place of luxury. It was a laboratory. From there, a new way of listening spread outward and reshaped global music. Fame followed, but it did not relocate him. King Tubby chose to stay. Leaving felt like betrayal. The neighborhood gave him identity, and he returned that loyalty through mentorship and presence. Success did not erase his sense of place. He did not build walls between himself and the streets that raised him. Jamaica at the time carried scars. Political violence had hardened into something quieter but more unpredictable. Guns circulated. Drugs funded desperation. Reputation did not shield anyone completely. Respect could turn fragile after dark. The soundtracks were joyful. The streets were not. Workdays were long. Nights ended late. King Tubby often returned home after midnight, carrying the fatigue of creation. The routine was familiar. Park. Open the gate. Step inside. A small transition between public influence and private rest. That transition became the point of failure. As his car stopped at the gate, the ordinary moment stretched. The street was still. The lights were low. He moved to open the entrance, focused on nothing more than ending the day. A figure emerged. Not a rival. Not a message bearer. A robber. The demand was simple. Money. Jewelry. A licensed firearm known to be carried for protection. No speech about culture. No recognition of legacy. Just opportunity meeting urgency. What followed unfolded quickly. Whether resistance occurred or fear froze the moment was never fully established. There was no drawn-out exchange. One shot broke the quiet. The body fell at the threshold. The sanctuary did not begin inside the house. It ended at the gate. The robber took what he could. A chain. The weapon. Objects stripped of meaning once separated from the men. The thief disappeared into the darkness that had already swallowed so many stories like this one. Help arrived too late. The injury proved fatal before care could intervene. King Tubby did not reach safety. The pioneer of dub died where routine had once felt harmless. News spread fast. Jamaica reacted as if a limb had been severed. Radio stations slowed. Artists paused. The loss was not only personal. It felt structural. A builder of sound had been removed by a transaction too small to explain the cost. Investigations followed. Questions lingered. The streets did not speak. The case slipped into uncertainty. Names surfaced. Rumors drifted. No conviction closed the wound. Time passed without resolution. The irony was heavy. A man who changed how the world heard music was taken for items that could not last. Creativity measured in decades was ended for moments of profit. The exchange did not add up. King Tubby was not targeted for his art. He was not silenced for influence. He was caught in a narrow gap between familiarity and exposure. Staying close to home kept him human. It also kept him reachable. His legacy did not dim. Dub traveled far beyond Waterhouse. The techniques he shaped became foundations for genres that followed. Every echo carried his fingerprint. Every remix carried his logic. Yet the ending remained unresolved. The home did not fail him. The environment did. The belief that belonging offered safety collided with a reality shaped by scarcity. When pressure tightens, symbols of success attract attention that does not care who built them. This story sits between celebration and warning. It honors innovation while admitting vulnerability. It shows that cultural architects are still subject to ordinary risks when systems break down around them. King Tubby remains present in sound, absent in justice. His music continues to travel freely. His case does not. When a cultural pioneer chooses loyalty over distance, does that choice deepen the art or dangerously narrow the margin for safety? Continue to Part 5, where betrayal does not come from the street, but from inside the home itself in the story of Carlton Barrett. Part 5, Carlton Barrett. Carlton Barrett did not stand at the front of the stage, yet every song moved because of him. The one-drop rhythm carried weight, restraint, and purpose. It slowed the pulse and gave space for reflection. Bob Marley and the Wailers did not sound like a movement by accident. Carlton was the anchor. His public image matched the music. Calm presence. Soft speech. Spiritual focus. A Rastafarian who let the drums speak instead of his mouth. He was known as gentle, disciplined, and inward-looking. Fame passed through him without changing his posture. The world saw harmony. Inside the home, harmony had already begun to fracture. The marriage no longer carried balance. Arguments replaced patience. Distance replaced trust. While the stage demanded unity, private life demanded confrontation. Carlton was navigating pressure from every side without showing it publicly. The fracture deepened quietly. His wife formed a relationship outside the marriage. What might have ended in separation took a darker path. Divorce meant loss, exposure, and uncertainty. Ending the marriage cleanly required acceptance. That acceptance never came. A different solution formed. Cold. Calculated. Permanent. Instead of departure, removal became the answer. The plan did not involve impulse. It involved outsourcing. Someone else would do what they could not. The home would become the scene. The gate would become the moment. A local gunman was hired. No message. No warning. No symbolic act. Just timing. Just certainty. The man who kept time for a generation would be taken at the moment he believed himself safest. The night carried no special signs. It was a holiday evening. Carlton drove home as he always did. The car slowed. The gate waited. Routine moved forward without suspicion. Familiar motions require no thought. That is what made the moment so exposed. As he stepped out to open the gate, the plan unfolded. There was no demand. No attempt to take property. No confusion about motive. Shots were fired immediately. The attack was precise. The goal was singular. Carlton collapsed at the threshold of his own home. Nothing was taken. No jewelry. No money. No belongings disturbed. The absence of theft spoke louder than any witness. This was not chance. This was personal. News of the death shocked Jamaica. Another pillar gone. Another loss attributed at first to the environment. Violence had become common enough that assumptions formed quickly. The streets were blamed. Randomness was blamed. Familiar narratives rushed in. Investigation shifted the story. Police found inconsistencies. The robbery angle collapsed. Attention turned inward. Behavior patterns. Relationships. Conversations. Motive surfaced where none was expected. The focus narrowed to the wife. Her connection to the lover emerged. The hired gunman was identified. The circle closed. Arrests followed. The truth appeared to rise. Court proceedings brought relief to many. Justice seemed possible. All involved were found guilty. The verdict suggested accountability. A rare moment where domestic betrayal did not dissolve into rumor. Sentences were handed down. The system appeared to work. Then the structure failed. A legal technicality surfaced. Instructions to the jury were challenged. Procedure outweighed outcome. The convictions were overturned. The door opened again. Those responsible were released. Years served dissolved into freedom. The ruling did not declare innocence. It declared error. To the public, the difference meant little. The result felt the same. Carlton Barrett remained gone. His killers walked away. The law left behind a wound that never closed. The reggae community absorbed the message quietly. Justice was not guaranteed. Truth did not always carry weight equal to process. The betrayal cut deeper because of proximity. This was not a street confrontation. This was not industry rivalry. It came from within the walls that should have protected him. Trust became the weapon. Familiarity became access. The one-drop beat continued to play worldwide. Joy traveled far. But underneath the rhythm lived this fracture. The philosophy of peace met the reality of human desire and calculation. Music preached unity. Life delivered division. Carlton Barrett's story reshaped how safety was understood. Not every threat announces itself. Some sit at the table. Some share the bed. The danger did not approach from outside. It was already inside. The legal stain remains. Not because the crime lacked clarity, but because resolution slipped away. History remembers the beat. It also remembers the failure to close the case properly. In reggae history, this moment stands as a warning that spiritual identity does not insulate against domestic collapse. Love can curdle. Loyalty can invert. The home can become the most dangerous place when betrayal is quiet and deliberate. Carlton Barrett gave the world rhythm and restraint. His ending delivered chaos and injustice. Both exist now in the same record. When the evidence points inward but the law looks away, where should accountability truly rest in cases like this? Continue to Part 6, where danger does not come from conspiracy, but from uncontrollable jealousy entering a bedroom in the story of Trouble. Part 6, Trouble. Trouble was not a myth built after death. He was a visible example of escape while alive. Atlanta knew his story. Streets shaped him, but they did not finish him. He survived environments that erased others and turned that survival into music grounded in realism rather than fantasy. His reputation was not about excess. It was about endurance. Success did not push him toward isolation. He stayed close to people. He stayed accessible. That openness defined him as much as his sound. On the night his life ended, there was no performance, no business meeting, no celebration. He was resting. He was a guest. He believed the moment was ordinary. He stayed at the apartment of a woman he was seeing. Not a permanent residence. Not a fortress. Just a place to sleep and reset. There was no anticipation of danger. No warning signs loud enough to register as threat. Comfort replaced vigilance. The danger was already in orbit. Her former partner had not accepted the end of the relationship. Separation did not translate into closure. Instead, it turned into fixation. Attention hardened into obsession. The absence of control became fuel rather than resolution. This was not random anger. It was sustained. Watching replaced moving on. Presence replaced distance. In that mindset, any Newman becomes an intruder, regardless of circumstance. The logic is not rational. It is possessive. It does not recognize boundaries. Late night offered opportunity. Silence masked movement. The apartment did not expect intrusion. Entry was forced. The peace inside shattered instantly. Trouble woke not to confusion alone, but to confrontation. He was unarmed. Disoriented. Pulled from rest into crisis without preparation. The space was tight. Time compressed. In moments like this, instinct acts before thought. His response was protective. Not aggressive. Protective. He tried to shield the woman. He tried to control the situation with presence rather than power. That instinct did not matter against a weapon. One shot ended everything. There was no exchange. No escalation over minutes. Just a sudden stop. The attacker fled. Fear replaced fixation. The reality of consequence arrived too late to reverse what was done. Trouble was left behind, wounded beyond recovery. Emergency response followed quickly, but time did not bend. He died without connection to the conflict that caused it. The motive was not personal history between two men. It was proximity. He was present where resentment had been growing unchecked. He became collateral to another person's refusal to let go. The search began immediately. Identification was clear. This was not a mystery shaped by shadows. The suspect was known. Pressure built fast. Community grief intensified the urgency. Family intervention changed the ending of the pursuit. The mother of the attacker stepped in. She recognized the direction this path led. She convinced her son to surrender. The decision did not undo harm, but it ended flight. In court, accountability replaced denial. The attacker admitted responsibility. The sentence removed him from society permanently. The legal system delivered finality in a way the moment itself did not. Yet resolution did not bring comfort. Trouble's death left a hollow space. He was not lost to industry rivalries or street disputes. He was taken by emotional instability that had been allowed to grow without interruption. This case exposed a quieter danger. Not every threat announces itself loudly. Some arrive disguised as private relationships. Some develop slowly behind closed doors. The violence does not target fame. It targets access. Trouble's strength could not protect him in sleep. His experience could not anticipate irrational rage. The lesson is uncomfortable. Survival skills built for public danger do not always apply in private spaces. The narrative often frames artists as architects of their own risk. This story resists that frame. He did not provoke. He did not escalate. He did not choose conflict. He existed near it. The apartment did not belong to him. The conflict did not belong to him. The outcome did. That imbalance is what makes this story linger. His music remains. His voice still speaks of resilience. But the ending reframes those messages. Safety is not guaranteed by wisdom or reputation. It can be erased by someone else's unresolved emotions. This was not a crime driven by gain. Nothing was taken. There was no reward. The act produced only absence and regret. It stands as a reminder that unchecked obsession can turn any space into a point of collapse. Trouble survived the streets, the industry, and expectation. He did not survive jealousy aimed at someone else. That contrast defines the tragedy. How should society respond when private fixation becomes a public threat, and where should intervention begin before loss becomes inevitable? Stay with us for Part 7, where loyalty to a neighborhood turns fatal in the unresolved killing of Stack Bundles. Part 7, Stack Bundles. New York in the mixtape era moved fast and loud. Music traveled hand to hand, car to car, block to block. Careers were built in stairwells and parking lots, not boardrooms. Visibility came from consistency, presence, and reputation. In that environment, survival and success were often mistaken for the same thing. Stack Bundles rose inside that system. Charisma. Precision. Relentless work ethic. He sounded like someone already comfortable with the spotlight, even before it arrived. Industry attention followed naturally. Cosigns formed. The future felt close enough to touch. He chose not to leave. The Redfern houses were not a backdrop to him. They were identity. Home meant people who knew his name before the music did. Familiar faces felt like insulation. Loyalty felt like protection. Distance felt like betrayal. Staying carried logic. He believed proximity to community reduced risk. Being known meant being watched over. Familiarity meant safety. That belief is powerful, especially for artists whose stories are rooted in where they come from. The city does not pause for belief. The building remained what it always was. Shared space. Shared access. Shared resentments. Success changes how someone is seen inside places where little changes for everyone else. The night unfolded without warning. Work finished late. The city slowed. The ride back crossed familiar streets. Dawn was close. Fatigue replaced alertness. Nothing suggested danger. He entered the lobby alone. The transition space between outside and inside. Between street and home. Between movement and rest. The kind of place people stop paying attention. Someone was already there. Waiting. Not surprised. Not rushing. This was not a coincidence. Timing was learned. Habits were known. The attack was prepared, not spontaneous. The confrontation was brief. No conversation that mattered. No attempt to retreat after taking what was wanted. The chain came off. The violence did not stop with that. The act continued beyond necessity. Stack bundles collapsed on the lobby floor of the building where he slept. Help arrived. Efforts followed. The outcome did not change. He was gone shortly after. News traveled instantly. Grief spread through the city and the music world. Shock turned to anger. Then to silence. The silence mattered more. Investigators came with urgency. They canvassed. They asked questions. In a place like that, someone always knows something. Eyes are everywhere. The problem is not awareness. It is consequence. No one spoke. Fear outweighed justice. Retaliation felt more immediate than closure. Distrust of authority sealed mouths. The code held firm. Rumors circulated. Names floated. Stories shifted. Nothing solidified. Time passed. Leads faded. The case stalled. Stack bundles became another name on a list too long for one genre. A future erased steps from safety. The narrative hardened into a lesson people debated rather than resolved. Some argued he should have left. That success demands distance. That loyalty can blind. Others argued the opposite. That the failure belonged to systems that allow success to become a target rather than a shield. The question lingered because the answer is uncomfortable. Leaving can save a life. Leaving can also sever identity. Staying can preserve meaning. Staying can also concentrate risk. The lobby where it happened returned to routine. People passed through. Floors were cleaned. The memory remained only for those who knew him. Justice did not arrive with time. His music took on a different weight. Bars once heard as confidence began to sound like warnings. Ambition echoed with consequence. The city kept moving. This was not a case defined by mystery alone. It was defined by silence. Silence chosen. Silence enforced. Silence understood as survival. Stack bundles did not lose his life chasing danger. He lost it standing where he believed he belonged. That distinction matters. The building did not betray him. The environment did not protect him. The choice to stay was not wrong. It was simply unforgiving. The debate continues because it has no clean resolution. Each new artist who stays close to home carries the same calculation, often without knowing it. Does staying grounded preserve authenticity, or does it quietly shorten the distance between success and risk in places that never forget envy? Continue to Part 8, where a home studio becomes a final destination in the unresolved double loss of Lala Brown. Part 8, Lala Brown. Lala Brown was standing at the edge of momentum. Not chasing attention, not waiting for discovery, but preparing for expansion. Her voice had already reached radios through collaboration. Industry doors were opening slowly, the way they do when potential feels real rather than manufactured. The next step was not a gamble. It was a plan. The plan lived inside a house. A room converted into a studio. Soundproofing. Equipment arranged with care. Long nights of recording followed by quiet mornings. It was not a temporary setup. It was a foundation. Music was being built where comfort and control met creativity. She shared that space with her partner. A producer with ambition and focus. Together they worked without spectacle. No entourage. No rotating visitors. The house was a workspace and a refuge. The idea was simple. Build first. Then step out. The door showed no signs of force. No broken glass. No damaged locks. Entry did not require effort. That detail shaped every theory that followed. Whoever came inside was either welcomed or trusted enough not to raise alarm. The discovery came days later. Silence drew concern. A relative checked in. The scene inside erased normal language. 2 lives ended in the place designed to give them direction. The equipment remained untouched. The room held its purpose without its creators. A detail cut deeper than the rest. A towel placed over Lala Brown's head. Not random. Not accidental. The meaning was unclear, but the message was heavy. It suggested intimacy or hesitation. It suggested the killer knew exactly who was being faced and chose distance anyway. Nothing pointed clearly outward. No sign of theft large enough to explain the outcome. No obvious trail. The house did not look ransacked. The studio stood as it had been left. The absence of chaos made the violence feel deliberate rather than frantic. Investigators searched for angles. Personal conflict. Professional rivalry. Romantic jealousy. Industry disputes. Each path opened briefly, then closed. The partner could have been the target. She could have been collateral. Or she could have been the reason. Every theory required assumptions that evidence could not confirm. The lack of forced entry kept returning. Trust became the focus. Someone known. Someone expected. Someone who did not trigger fear when the door opened. That narrowed possibilities but did not deliver answers. Milwaukee reacted with disbelief. Pride turned to grief. Lala Brown was not a distant figure. She was local. Accessible. A success in progress rather than a completed legend. That made the loss feel personal across the city. Time passed. Leads cooled. Witnesses stayed silent or had nothing solid to offer. The case moved from active pursuit to quiet endurance. Each year without resolution added weight rather than clarity. Her voice remained. One song continued to circulate. What once sounded like promise now sounded like echo. The music froze her at a moment just before arrival. The industry moved on. The question did not. This case unsettles because it violates expectation. Homes are supposed to protect. Studios are supposed to create. Doors are supposed to separate inside from outside. None of that held. The killer did not rush. The killer did not break in. The killer entered a space built on trust and left it empty. That is what keeps this story alive. Speculation filled the gaps. Jealousy from someone watching progress too closely. A personal grudge hidden behind familiarity. A dispute meant for one person that took 2 lives instead. Each idea carried weight. None carried proof. Cold cases age differently than solved ones. They do not fade. They calcify. Every retelling sharpens the absence of resolution. The longer they last, the more they become mirrors for fear rather than records of fact. Lala Brown's story is not about danger on stage or chaos in public. It is about vulnerability where defenses are lowest. It is about how ambition can draw attention that does not announce itself. The studio still symbolizes what could have been. Creativity paused mid-sentence. Equipment waiting for hands that never returned. A future erased without explanation. Her name remains tied to a question mark. Not because of scandal, but because silence won. The kind of silence that swallows answers whole. When a place built for creation becomes the site of loss without witnesses or motive, which theory feels most believable to you, and why does it linger? Stay with us for part 9, where a door opened to authority and a simple mistake ended the life of a legendary musician. Part 9, Don Myrick. Don Myrick lived behind the sound rather than in front of it. His work traveled farther than his name. The saxophone lines that lifted classic records were his signature, even when listeners never learned who shaped them. He was present without demanding attention. A quiet architect inside loud music. Life had slowed. Touring was no longer constant. The days were ordinary. Home was modest. There was no entourage, no spectacle, no sense of threat. The idea of danger did not belong to that morning. The system arrived before daylight fully settled. A search warrant existed, built on suspicion rather than certainty. The approach was aggressive by design. Speed. Force. Shock. These methods were normalized in that era, especially when drugs were involved, regardless of scale. The entry was not patient. It was loud and abrupt. Doors were struck. Voices filled tight hallways. For anyone inside, the experience would have felt like invasion rather than procedure. Context disappears when fear takes over. Don Myrick was inside his own apartment. He was not armed. He was not preparing for confrontation. He was reacting to confusion. The noise demanded response. The instinct to check the door was human. In his hand was a lighter. A simple object used for everyday tasks. In poor lighting and heightened tension, perception collapsed. The shape became a threat in the mind of an officer trained to anticipate danger before clarity. The decision happened in a fraction of time. There was no extended exchange. No verification. The response was immediate. A single action ended a life that had shaped decades of music. Don Myrick fell in his doorway. Not on a stage. Not in transit. At the threshold of his own space. He was still in sleepwear. The image unsettled everyone who learned of it. Medical help followed, but the injury was fatal. The reality settled fast. A man who had survived changing eras, demanding schedules, and industry pressure did not survive a moment of mistaken identity inside his home. The music community reacted with disbelief and anger. Fellow artists spoke openly. Dedications appeared. Performances took on a different tone. The loss felt senseless because it was. Official explanations emphasized fear and split-second judgment. Training protocols were cited. The object was misidentified. The reasoning followed familiar patterns. The language focused on process rather than outcome. For the family, explanation did not equal justice. Grief turned into action. A civil case was filed. The argument centered on tactics. On whether escalation created the danger it claimed to prevent. The case did not go to trial. A settlement was reached. Money changed hands. Responsibility did not. The agreement closed the legal path without answering the moral questions that lingered. Public debate intensified. Supporters of aggressive enforcement argued inevitability. Critics argued that speed without certainty breeds irreversible error. The discussion extended beyond this case into broader concerns about how authority operates under pressure. Don Myrick became part of that conversation, though he never sought to be. His death represented more than a personal loss. It became a reference point for systemic failure. The home again failed to protect. Not because of exposure or trust, but because procedure overwhelmed judgment. The door that should have separated safety from danger became the site where both collided. Music historians remember his sound clearly. The ending remains difficult to place alongside it. Celebration and tragedy share the same record now. This was not a crime of passion. Not a robbery. Not a conspiracy. It was the outcome of design choices made far above one individual. A system that prioritized speed over certainty accepted error as collateral. Don Myrick did nothing to invite his end. He responded to confusion as any person would. That truth keeps the story alive. The question left behind does not belong only to musicians. It belongs to anyone who believes their home is neutral ground. When authority arrives without clarity, safety becomes fragile. His legacy continues through recordings that still play daily. The unresolved feeling remains because compensation cannot replace caution after the fact. When mistakes carry permanent consequences, how should systems change to prevent ordinary moments from becoming irreversible endings? Stay with us for part 10, where a survivor of the streets faces a final ambush steps from his own front door in the story of Slim 400. Part 10, Slim 400. Slim 400 carried the reputation of a survivor. Years earlier, he had been hit and lived. The scars became proof. The story hardened into belief. If he could walk away from that, then fate had already shown its limits. Survival began to feel permanent rather than conditional. That belief changes posture. It alters how danger is measured. Familiar streets stop feeling hostile. Routine becomes comfort. Confidence replaces caution. The idea that death had already tried and failed created a quiet sense of immunity. Home reinforced that feeling. The driveway was ordinary. Predictable. A short pause between the street and the door. The place where tension usually drops. Where the day ends. Where vigilance fades. What Slim did not see was preparation. Eyes had been on him long before he arrived. Movement had been tracked. Patterns noted. The moment was chosen carefully, not impulsively. This was not coincidence. It was timing. The approach was deliberate. A vehicle moved without noise or display. Lights stayed off. Doors opened with purpose. No shouting. No warning. The silence before action mattered as much as the action itself. A nearby camera recorded sound. Not images that clarified faces or intent, but audio that preserved chaos. The struggle. The urgency. The sharp interruptions that followed. The recording turned a private moment into public evidence without offering comfort. Slim reacted on instinct. He moved. He tried to escape the funnel created by walls and parked cars. The driveway narrowed options. The attackers advanced with intent. Distance collapsed quickly. The pursuit ended where it began. The space meant to welcome him back became the trap. Multiple impacts followed. The body fell within steps of safety. The attackers returned to their vehicle and disappeared, leaving silence behind. Emergency response arrived fast. The damage had already decided the outcome. At the hospital, effort met limitation. Slim 400 did not recover. The men who once walked away did not this time. The reaction carried grim recognition. Los Angeles had seen this pattern before. Survival stories rarely end with retirement. Street politics do not forget. Debts remain. Identity carries consequence long after music success. Investigation moved with urgency and familiarity. This was not a random act. Evidence pointed toward organized motive. Affiliations. Ongoing rivalries. Old lines never fully erased by success or time. Arrests followed. Names surfaced. The motive aligned with patterns long documented. This was not theft. Nothing was taken. The objective was finality. The message was directed outward, not inward. Slim 400 became the closing chapter in a sequence that shared a single truth. Home does not neutralize history. Location does not erase context. The past can wait patiently for a moment of stillness. His earlier survival now read differently. It was not proof of invincibility. It was borrowed time. The streets do not announce when the loan is due. The driveway stands as symbol. A place designed for pause became a point of no return. The comfort of routine masked the reality of surveillance. Familiarity lowered the shield. Music continues to play. Loyalty continues to be praised. Authenticity remains currency. The cost remains unevenly distributed. This story completes a pattern rather than breaking it. Each chapter in this series ends near a door, a gate, a threshold. Places meant to divide danger from rest failed to do so. Slim 400 did not die chasing conflict. He died arriving home. That distinction matters. It reframes how safety is understood when visibility, history, and environment overlap. The belief that survival once guarantees survival again is powerful. It is also fragile. Confidence can soften edges that danger still respects. His death leaves a final echo. Not of sound, but of warning. Success does not end risk. It can sharpen it. Across these stories, one truth repeats. The home is only as safe as the forces that respect its boundaries. When those forces collapse, walls mean nothing. Do you think surviving violence once changes how people judge risk, or does it quietly invite the next strike to come closer? If this final chapter stayed with you, continue watching as we explore how these patterns repeat beyond music, where safety ends and consequence begins.